is from this beautiful book. Which problem does it have? First and foremost, it has two big problems. One is when I scanned it from a letter size book, right? So if I go in Photoshop and I go image size, that is what allows you in Photoshop to control your image size, you'll see that it is actually, let me go in inches, is only 7 by 9 pixels. My stage that I just showed you in those pictures, every image was 24 inches tall, 24. So I knew that I needed to go a little bit more than double, because this one is about 9.8 is about 10. So I needed to go a little bit more than double. So when I scanned my book, I scanned it at a higher resolution. So instead, I knew I would need 150 to print, right? But instead of scanning it at 150, I scanned it at 600 dpi. Because there is this beautiful things I want you to remember. That is, there's a beautiful dance you can dance, a little tango that you can dance between the resolution and the inches size of your image so that you don't lose any quality. And all hinges on this magic word that there's resample. So if you uncheck resample right now, and you go here and you type 24 instead of 9.8, you see that my preview shows no change whatsoever. So my pixel did not get stretched, did not get deformed. Everything stayed the same except the resolution went down. So what I did is I reduced the amount of pixels per inch. So instead of having 600 pixels per inch, now I have 245. There is still plenty for printing, but now I have a much larger image. So that's the way you always want to operate. What if I mess it up? What if I'm going to hold option that brings the cancel to reset? What if instead I have resample checked and I go in here, I'm going to go back into inches, and I type 24. What did it happen? Did you see that the preview this time changed and showed that what it did is it took my pixel and had to stretch them bigger, right? Because now I'm going from 9 inches to 24 inches, leaving my resolution at 600. So it doesn't have any way to go but taking those 600 pixels and getting them to be larger. And you don't want that. You always want to try to keep the integrity of your image. You don't want to stretch anything, because when you stretch pixel, you end up losing quality. Is that clear to everyone? So every time you know you need your image bigger, you will need to do this. Now, the reason why I'm insisting on this is because every year I have a senior student, because you remember I told you, sadly, in art and design, you have this 182 that focuses on Photoshop. And then as a designer, as a graphic designer, you don't have much more classes that you have to take in Photoshop. So photography is different. But for designer, oftentimes they forget a lot of this. And they get to the end and they need to exhibit in the art gallery for their senior show their work. And they come to me and say, you won't believe it. I created all my beautiful drawings at letter size. And now I have them small and I need to put them in the gallery on the wall at 36 by 48. What do I do? And I generally say, if they're analog, scan them really at high resolution and then play that tango, dance that tango I taught you with the resample. If they are digital drawing, print them at the best quality printer you can find, then scan them at high resolution and dance with Photoshop. So keep that in mind. You will run into it probably one day. Okay, so the problem with this is that story. I'm going to go back in image. I'm going to actually leave the image size as it is, because in this case, I just want to demo color correcting. I need to go in image rotation and choose 180, right? Because it's upside down. What else is problematic in this image? Yes, Shayla. Beyond that, it's very washed out. Do you see that? I don't see the curve very much. What do you mean it curves? Are the paper? Oh, yeah, we can fix that. But let's actually focus on color. I think what I'm trying to highlight here is what you generally end up with when you scan your sketches. And oftentimes your sketches, you don't have this worry about the fold. But what you always will run into is the colors of your pencil or pen being like this, very washed out. So what are the steps to do? Step number 1 is Command L for levels. What does graphs show? It shows that the darkest black in Photoshop and the darkest point in this image are missed, are not aligned. So this image, the darkest point does not coincide with the Photoshop darkest possible black. So what I need to do is grab that little slider and tuck it in. And you see I'm already kind of fixing it a little bit, right? I do the same thing on the other side. Same, this is for the light. The lightest point in Photoshop and the lightest point of your image should line up. So that's the first step. I'm going to say, okay. Did I achieve the deepest possible black? I didn't. What else? By the way, I'm going to take you there. This time, instead of doing shortcut, I'm going to show you where you find all the possible magic tools to do incredible color correcting. And we're starting. Next week, we're going to play with it more and more. So if you go in adjustment, image adjustment, that's the level I was telling you about. In this image, I don't have worries about brightness and contrast. I could go in brightness and contrast and say, hey, what if I brighten it up? The problem is not brightening up just the color, but it's also the center, but it's also brightening up the black that I actually want darker. So this one's not going to help us. So the next step is to go into a beautiful tool called exposures. I'm going to do curves next class. Curves are beautiful but complicated. Exposure is much easier because you have really three variables. One is this image, when the images are washed out, oftentimes means there's too much light in there. And it's normal because I don't know if you know how a scanner works, but it works based on light. It shoots light on that page. So oftentimes when you scan something, it tends to be what we would call overexposed. So if you go with exposure, this one will lighten it up and this one will darken it up. We're darkening it. But obviously we're also darkening the colors. So what if I go in offset this time? And what offset will do is we'll darken the darkest colors and kind of bump up the intensity of the colors as well. So you see I'm darkening it with exposure, and you see with exposure I finally reach that deep black that I wanted. So in terms of, with offset, in terms of exposure, whenever you have an image or you scan that is too washed out, push exposure toward the left just a little bit, be careful, and then go in offset, and if you want it a little bit even darker, and that means more intensity in the saturation of the color, push offset to the left. Now the gamma correction really helps you because the problem is the other two act on the saturation of the color. So the colors are kind of like really, really deep and bright, right? Sometimes, in fact, sometimes they're too bright. Let me show you. If I go in here, in here, like this. I think that now having offset at, this point and having actually the exposure a little bit above the zero works, except the orange is too bright orange. So if you go with the gamma correction, what that does, it will take those brightest colors and tune them down a little bit. So I'm going to take gamma correction to the left, and you'll see that that bright orange now is just a pretty mellow, normal kind of like orange thing. So the exposure fixes how much light is flooding the image. The offset act on deepening those saturations, those colors, and then the gamma correction allows you to lighten up the lightest colors, the colors that are a little bit too bright. So I'm going to say okay, and I'm going to do Command Z so you see the difference between the two images from where I started to where I got. Look at this. The difference is dramatic. To the point that Shayla's problem by which we could see the folding of the book is even that is fixed. Is that clear to everyone? Any question? So that's another beautiful tool. Let me actually right now stop the recording and start and